The small moon of Illyris, once a thriving trade hub, now lay under the watchful eye of the Galactic Council's peacekeepers. Aiden Foster had come to this quiet corner of the galaxy to escape his past, trading his days of soldiering and politics for a life of solitude. The moon, with its rolling hills and starlit nights, had become his sanctuary. Yet even here, in the farthest reaches of the galaxy, the shadows of war still lingered. He sat at a small table on the balcony of his modest home, staring into the vast emptiness of space. The quiet hum from the nearby orbital station was the only sound, a reminder that peace was fragile. The call had come just an hour ago. It was from Ambassador Tazra, the voice of the Galactic Council. She requested his presence urgently. Aiden knew this moment was coming. It always did. They had tried to pull him back into their web of politics before, but each time he'd refused. This time was different. The voice on the other end of the line had been shaking, filled with a fear Aiden had never heard from her. "They know we're vulnerable, Aiden," she had said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone's targeting the council, starting with you." He couldn't ignore her plea. He had been a soldier, after all, a strategist, a protector. And when the galaxy was in danger, there were few who could do what he had done, few who understood the intricacies of galactic warfare like he did. But he had left that life behind, or so he thought. Now, standing before a council of political leaders and military commanders, Aiden couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision that had led him here. He had been the one to bring peace to a divided galaxy once. He had brokered countless treaties, faced insurgents, led fleets, and fought battles. But the galaxy had changed. The peace that had taken so much to build was beginning to crack, and Aiden wasn't sure he was the man to fix it again. Not after everything he had lost. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Captain Zarakor asked, her voice cutting through his thoughts. Zora was a fierce alien warrior with a scared face and a reputation for ruthlessness. She had been one of the few who fought beside him in the worst of times. The two of them shared a bond forged in the heat of battle, but she saw something in him now that even he didn't recognize. Aiden glanced at her, his eyes hardened by years of conflict. "I don't have a choice," he muttered. "The council needs me. Whether I like it or not, I'm the only one who can stop this." Zora's gaze softened, but she didn't press him further. She knew the burden Aiden carried, how the galaxy's fragile peace weighed heavily on his shoulders, how the ghosts of past wars haunted him. As they entered the grand chamber of the Galactic Council, Aiden could feel the tension in the air. The room was a stark contrast to the quiet moon he had come from, a symbol of the vast power of the galaxy, yet riddled with internal strife. The council members, once allies, now looked at each other with suspicion. Trust had become a rare commodity in these chambers, and the peace that had taken decades to form was unraveling faster than they could repair it. "Foster," said Ambassador Tazra, rising to greet him. Her face was pale, worry etched deeply into her features. "We need you. The peace we fought for is under attack. We don't know by who or why, but we're certain of one thing. The war we avoided is coming for us." Aiden's heart sank. He had hoped he was wrong, but deep down he knew. The galaxy had never been meant to stay at peace forever. There was always someone out there, always something that threatened to pull everything apart. And now it was his turn to protect that peace, whether he wanted to or not. "Who's behind this?" Aiden asked, his voice cold and steady. The council members exchanged uncertain glances, and he could see the fear in their eyes. "We don't know," Tazra said, "but we need your help. We need someone who can see the bigger picture, someone who understands how fragile this peace is." Aiden nodded slowly, his mind already racing through the possibilities. The galaxy was on the brink once again, and this time, there might be no coming back. The burden of protection had fallen squarely on his shoulders, and as much as he wanted to refuse, as much as he wanted to stay out of it, he knew that walking away wasn't an option. The galaxy needed him, but this time, Aiden Foster would not be the warrior he once was. He would be the reluctant shield of a peace too fragile to endure another war. And the storm was just beginning. The heavy door to the Galactic Council's strategy room slid shut behind Aiden with a finality that echoed in the silence. As he took his seat, the weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a vice. He wasn't just here to help resolve a political dispute. This was something much darker, something more insidious. The very fabric of peace was at stake. Ambassador Tazra stood before the massive projection screen, her fingers hovering over the console as she brought up a series of encrypted files. The room was filled with high-ranking officials, all of whom were just as clueless about the true enemy as Aiden. There have been several high-profile attacks across the galaxy. Tazra began, her voice steady but strained. First, a trade convoy was ambushed on the fringe of Zithar space. Then, we received reports of a bombing at a diplomatic summit on Duran Prime. And most recently, several council members were targeted on Illyris. But it's what we discovered about these attacks that's most troubling. Aiden's eyes narrowed. What's the connection? How does this tie back to the Black Banner? Tazra paused, her gaze flickering with uncertainty. We don't know yet, but the attacks are too precise, too coordinated. These aren't random acts of terrorism. They're targeted, methodical. Someone is manipulating events from the shadows. Aiden's pulse quickened as the pieces began to fall into place. He'd known the Black Banner, a militant faction formed in the aftermath of the last war. The galaxy had thought them defeated, their leadership disbanded, and their military assets destroyed. But deep down, Aiden had always known that such organizations didn't just disappear. They adapted, they waited, and they resurfaced when the galaxy's guard was down. Who's pulling the strings this time? Aiden asked, leaning forward. We believe it's an underground network within the council itself, Tazra said, her voice barely above a whisper. High-ranking officials have been compromised, and they're working in tandem with external factions who have their own agendas. We've traced some of the financial backers, but they're cloaked in layers of subterfuge. It's almost like someone's been building this for years. Aiden's mind raced. If the Black Banner was truly behind this, they were playing a long game, a game that might already be too far along to stop. He leaned back, trying to compose himself, but his past experiences weighed heavily on his thoughts. The shadow of war was creeping back into the galaxy, and it was dragging everything and everyone down with it. You think the council is compromised? Aiden asked, his voice low. Tazra nodded solemnly. We don't know who we can trust anymore, Aiden. And that's why we need you. You've fought in wars. You've seen how quickly alliances can fall apart. The council needs someone with your skills. Someone who can cut through the deception and find the truth before it's too late. Aiden looked around the room. The faces of the other council members were tense, their eyes filled with uncertainty. These were the very people who had once placed their faith in him, and now they were looking to him to save the galaxy from unraveling. But Aiden wasn't sure he could. His days as a soldier had left him with scars that ran deeper than the physical ones he carried. He had been forced to make impossible decisions before, but this was different. The stakes weren't just about winning battles. They were about preserving the fragile peace he had hoped would last forever. I'll do what I can, Aiden said finally, the reluctant words escaping his lips. It was the only answer he could give. Tazra's gaze softened with gratitude, but the tension in the room was palpable. Everyone knew the stakes, and no one believed that the path ahead would be easy. But Aiden had walked this road before, and he knew better than anyone that sometimes the hardest battles weren't fought with weapons. They were fought with trust. He stood and turned to face the map of the galaxy on the projection screen. The stars shimmered brightly in the darkness, each one a distant world, a potential ally, or a potential enemy. As Aiden prepared to delve deeper into the conspiracy, a feeling of dread settled over him. He had no illusions about the danger ahead. The Black Banner was out there, waiting, and this time, they weren't just targeting planets. They were targeting the very foundation of peace itself, and it was up to him to stop them. The galaxy had trusted him once before, but as Aiden stood at the edge of a new war, he wondered if he was still the protector they needed, or if he had become a relic of a time long gone. The answer, he feared, was something he would have to discover in the coming days. The days that followed were a blur of strategy meetings, encrypted transmissions, and half-forgotten whispers of the past. Aiden had always thrived in the chaos of battle, his mind sharp and decisive, but this was different. This time, he wasn't leading soldiers into the fray. He was navigating the treacherous waters of politics and espionage, trying to untangle a web of deceit that was just as dangerous as any battlefield. The first piece of the puzzle came from a surprising source, a former ally turned fugitive. Darius Core, a former Black Banner lieutenant, had been one of the few to escape the faction's purge after the last war. His knowledge of the group's inner workings made him invaluable, but trust was a fragile thing. Darius had betrayed them once, selling out his comrades for a price. Now he was a loose cannon, someone who might be more of a threat than an asset. Aiden knew that if they were going to uncover the truth, they needed Darius's help. He had a reputation for surviving against all odds, and his insight into the Black Banner could offer them a lead. But trusting him wasn't easy. The scars of their previous encounters ran deep. Aiden stood on the observation deck of the Council's flagship, staring out into the abyss of space. The endless expanse of stars seemed like a silent reminder of the fragility of peace. His thoughts turned inward, reflecting on the decisions he'd made in the past, decisions that still haunted him. The memory of the last war, the deaths, the betrayals, the sacrifices, felt like ghosts lurking just behind his eyes. Ready to face your ghosts again? Zora's voice cut through his thoughts, and Aiden turned to find her standing at his side, her expression unreadable. He gave her a half-hearted smile. "I faced worse." Zora raised an eyebrow. "Is that supposed to reassure me?" Aiden let out a deep sigh. "I don't know if anything can reassure any of us. The galaxy's been through too much to be this fragile." Zora studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You're right, but we can't afford to doubt ourselves now. If Darius is our key, then we follow him, no matter how much it burns." Aiden's gaze returned to the stars, his mind grappling with the weight of his decision. He had made the call. They would track Darius down, bring him in, and extract whatever information he had on the Black Banner. But in doing so, Aiden knew he was walking into dangerous territory. A fugitive's mind was often as unpredictable as the storms that raged on uncharted planets. Hours later, they were aboard a stealth ship, cutting through the dark void of space on their way to Halthar's Rift, a remote asteroid belt where Darius had been rumored to hide. The ship was eerily quiet, the hum of its engines the only sound as Aiden and Zora prepared for what lay ahead. As the ship approached the rift, Aiden's unease grew. This was where the Black Banner had once operated with impunity, a lawless zone, filled with criminals, mercenaries, and lost souls. It was a place where even the Council's most trusted peacekeepers feared to tread. "We're close," Zora said, breaking the silence. "This is where it all began, Aiden. The Black Banner's rise. The end of the last war." Aiden nodded but didn't respond. His mind was already running through possible scenarios, calculating risks, and weighing the consequences of each move. He had lived through the chaos before, but this time, the stakes were higher. If the Black Banner had truly resurfaced, if they were behind the recent attacks, there was no telling how far they would go to destabilize the fragile peace. "I'll make contact with him first," Aiden said. "Stay back, Zora. We don't know what kind of trap we're walking into." Zora opened her mouth to protest, but stopped herself, knowing the determination in Aiden's voice. She nodded. "Don't take any chances, Aiden. The galaxy needs you." The ship's sensors pinged, and Aiden knew they were getting close. A dense fog of asteroid debris blocked their view, but the advanced navigation system guided them through with precision. It wasn't long before they picked up the signal, a faint encrypted transmission from a nearby asteroid base. Aiden's fingers flew over the console, activating a secure line. The screen flickered, and a familiar face appeared. Darius Core, rugged and older, with a gaunt look in his eyes that spoke of the years he had spent running from his past. "You're a hard man to find, Foster," Darius said, his voice low but tinged with a hint of amusement. "I'd say I'm surprised to see you here, but I know better." Aiden's jaw tightened. "We need answers, Darius. The Black Banner is back, and this time, they're targeting the Council. You know more than you're telling." Darius chuckled darkly. "You always were the persistent one. Fine, I'll tell you what I know. But first, you'll need to prove you're not just another pawn in their game." Aiden's eyes hardened. The real game had just begun. Aiden's hand gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white. The subtle tension in Darius's voice was a reminder of the dangerous dance they were about to undertake. Darius Core was no ordinary informant. He was a man of many faces, and Aiden knew better than to trust him too easily. But the situation was dire, and there was no other choice. Darius leaned closer to the screen, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of calculation and something darker, like the edge of a knife just before it cut. "You want information, Foster? Fine," Darius said, his tone casual, but there was a sharpness beneath it. "But nothing comes free. I know what you're doing here. You're looking to piece together the remnants of a war that never ended. You're chasing ghosts, but be warned, ghosts have a nasty habit of dragging the living down with them." Aiden's patience was wearing thin. "Cut the theatrics, Darius. If you have information on the Black Banner's plans, then share it. The galaxy's on the brink of another war, and I don't have time for your games." Darius raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "Oh, I know. The galaxy's always on the edge, isn't it? But I'm not just some informant you can push around. I'm the one with the leverage here. You want answers. Prove you're willing to pay the price." Aiden's jaw clenched. There it was again, the game. Darius wasn't going to give up anything without getting something in return. Aiden had known it from the start, but now he had to decide just how far he was willing to go. "I'm not here for your petty bargains," Aiden snapped. "Tell me what you know, or I'll find another way." Darius's lips curled into a sardonic smile. "That's the problem, Foster. You think you have all the time in the galaxy. You don't. But fine, I'll give you something. Consider it a start." The screen flickered again, and a hologram of a star system appeared, Vega Prime, a forgotten world that had once been a hub of commerce and power, now reduced to a ghost town. The hologram zoomed in on an abandoned research facility on the planet's surface. "This is where it all began," Darius continued, his voice lower now, tinged with a seriousness that caught Aiden off guard. "The Black Banner's resurgence isn't just a response to the Council's weakness. It's about something more. This facility, Vega Prime, holds the key. Whatever they're planning, it started there, but you'll need to be careful. It's a trap." Aiden's mind raced as the implications sank in. Vega Prime, it had been off the radar for years, a planet discarded in the wake of the war. If Darius was telling the truth, the Black Banner had been laying their plans long before the recent attacks. But what was so important about Vega Prime? "Why Vega Prime?" Aiden asked, his voice laced with suspicion. "What's there that they're after?" Darius leaned back, his face darkening. "You think the Black Banner's just a bunch of renegades fighting for control? No, Foster. It's bigger than that. They've uncovered something ancient. A weapon, perhaps, or a power hidden deep beneath the surface. I don't know for sure, but I do know this. Whoever controls that facility will control the future of the galaxy." Aiden absorbed the information in silence, the weight of it settling over him like a storm cloud. A weapon? An ancient power? The possibilities were terrifying, and the urgency of their mission had just escalated exponentially. "And what's your price for this little bit of info?" Aiden asked, trying to keep his tone even, despite the tension coiling in his chest. Darius's smile returned, but there was no humor in it now. "You're not ready for that, Foster. Not yet. But when the time comes, you'll know what I want, and I'll make sure you're in no position to refuse." The transmission flickered, and Darius's face disappeared, leaving only the cold, empty space of the dark void. Aiden stared at the empty screen for a moment, his mind racing. He had no choice but to follow Darius's lead. Vega Prime was the next step, but it wasn't just a planet. It was a ticking time bomb. And if the Black Banner truly held the key to something more dangerous than any weapon they'd encountered before, then Aiden and his team would have to act fast. But Darius's words lingered in his mind, like a warning that refused to be ignored. "You'll know when the time comes." It was a cryptic promise, but one that spoke volumes. Darius had played this game before, and Aiden was now a player in it too. "You're sure about this?" Zara's voice broke through his thoughts, and Aiden turned to find her standing by the doorway, her expression serious. Aiden nodded. "We're going to Vega Prime, and we're going to find out exactly what the Black Banner is after. But it's going to be dangerous, and we may not come back the same." Zara met his gaze, a spark of determination in her eyes. "Then let's make sure we're ready. The galaxy needs us, no matter the cost." The course was set. The fragile piece of the galaxy hung by a thread, and Aiden could feel the weight of it with every passing moment. The road ahead was fraught with danger, deception, and betrayal. But he wasn't backing down, not now, not when the stakes were so high. The war for the galaxy's future was about to begin, and Aiden Foster would be its reluctant shield. The journey to Vega Prime was swift but tense. Every moment felt like an eternity as Aiden sat in the quiet darkness of the ship's command deck, his eyes fixed on the blinking coordinates guiding them toward the forgotten planet. Vega Prime wasn't just a relic of the past, it was a ghost, abandoned and untouched for years. Its history was riddled with questions, and now, at the edge of the galaxy, it was about to reveal its dark secrets. Zara stood beside him, arms crossed, her eyes scanning the star map in front of them. The air was thick with unspoken thoughts, both of them fully aware of the danger that awaited them. "What do you think we'll find there?" Zara asked, her voice calm, but betraying a hint of unease. The unknown always carried a weight, especially in a place like this, forgotten and hidden from the galaxy's prying eyes. Aiden leaned back in his seat, his fingers brushing against the worn edge of his console. "I'm not sure. Darius didn't give us much to go on. But whatever it is, it's enough to make the Black Banner put everything at risk. It could be a weapon, or worse, we're walking into a war zone." Zara. She nodded, her gaze shifting to the starfield outside. "I know, but we've faced worse before. We'll face it together." Aiden didn't reply, instead focusing on the planet looming ahead. It was a small, barren world, its surface jagged and desolate, pocked with craters and scars of long-forgotten conflicts. The atmosphere was thin, offering little protection from the harsh vacuum of space. On the ground, traces of old infrastructure still stood, rusted and decaying in the shadow of the past. As their ship neared the surface, the ship's sensors began to pick up anomalies. It wasn't the usual storm of meteors or space debris. They were disturbances in the electromagnetic fields, a signature only someone with advanced technology would leave behind. The Black Banner was already here, the trap had been set. "They know we're coming," Aiden muttered under his breath, his hands gripping the console as his mind ran through contingency plans. The galaxy's fragile peace wasn't just about preventing wars. It was about protecting the secrets that could unravel everything. Vega Prime was one of those secrets. The ship landed with a soft thud, its landing gear sinking into the ash-like surface of the planet. The moment the engines powered down, a thick silence filled the cabin, the kind that made Aiden's skin crawl. Zara unstrapped herself and stood, the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. "We go in quiet," Aiden ordered, his voice low but firm. "The last thing we need is a firefight. We need intel, nothing more." Zara nodded, drawing her blaster as she moved toward the airlock. "Understood. But if they're expecting us, it won't be that easy." Aiden didn't respond, instead checking his own equipment, a standard-issue energy blade, a wrist communicator, and a few high-powered grenades for emergencies. He wasn't expecting a simple walk in the park, but they had to be prepared. The Black Banner wasn't known for playing fair. The airlock hissed open, and the harsh, dry wind of Vega Prime greeted them. Aiden stepped onto the surface first, followed by Zara. The planet was eerie in its stillness, a silent witness to decades of neglect. The once bustling research facility loomed ahead, half buried in the sand and dust, but its shape was unmistakable. It had been a symbol of hope once, a place where the brightest minds had gathered to push the boundaries of scientific discovery. Now, it was nothing more than a decaying tomb. The two of them moved toward the entrance, the facility's silhouette casting a long, jagged shadow across the landscape. There were no signs of life, no guards, no automated defenses, nothing. It was too quiet. "We're not alone," Zara whispered, her eyes skating the horizon. Aiden held up a hand to stop her. "Keep your eyes peeled. This place is a trap, and we've just walked into it." They reached the entrance without incident. The door was slightly ajar, its metal frame scratched and scarred from years of neglect. Aiden pushed it open, his heart pounding in his chest. Inside, the air was stale, and the dim emergency lights flickered overhead, casting long shadows on the walls. They moved deeper into the facility, their footsteps echoing eerily in the vast, empty halls. The deeper they went, the more Aiden felt the weight of the place bearing down on him. It wasn't just the ruins of a forgotten research facility. It was a reminder of the cost of war. The kind of war that had left scars across the galaxy, and that the Black Banner was now willing to reignite. "This way," Aiden muttered, motioning toward a series of stairs that led deeper into the bowels of the facility. Something told him that whatever they were looking for, it was buried beneath their feet. The path grew darker as they descended, the flickering lights giving way to total darkness. Aiden's pulse quickened. It was too quiet now. The air itself seemed to hum with an oppressive energy. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence, a low, resonant hum, almost imperceptible at first, but growing louder as they neared the bottom of the stairs. Aiden's instincts screamed at him to stop, but it was too late. They were already committed. A soft, eerie glow flickered from the depths of the room ahead. The door leading into the heart of the facility creaked open, revealing what lay beyond, a chamber of impossibly advanced technology, long forgotten by the galaxy. In the center of the room, a dormant device stood, pulsing with power. Aiden's breath caught in his throat. This was it, the heart of the Black Banner's resurgence, and it was worse than he could have ever imagined. The chamber was vast, its walls lined with strange, alien technology that hummed faintly in the dim glow of the dormant device in the center. Aiden could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, the knowledge that this place had been a center for groundbreaking science, a place that had once held the promise of peace and now stood as a harbinger of chaos. The device in the center of the room was unlike anything he had ever seen before. It was a colossal structure, shaped like a towering spire, its surface covered in intricate symbols and patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles. It pulsed with an eerie light, faint but steady, as if it were alive, waiting for something or someone to awaken it. Zara moved cautiously beside him, her eyes darting across the room as if expecting something to jump out at them from the shadows. Her blaster was drawn, but her fingers were twitching at her side, ready to react at a moment's notice. "What is this place?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the humming of the machine. Aiden didn't answer right away. He couldn't. His mind was racing, trying to piece together the significance of what they were looking at. He had known the Black Banner was dangerous, but this was beyond anything he had imagined. "It's not just a weapon," he finally said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "It's something far more ancient. This is a relic." The realization hit him like a wave. The Black Banner had uncovered something much more potent than a simple weapon. It was an artifact of unimaginable power, possibly of pre-galactic origins. But who had built it? And why had it been hidden here, on a forgotten planet, for so long? Before he could gather his thoughts, a voice crackled through his earpiece, snapping him out of his reverie. "Aiden," Zara's voice was sharp, laced with urgency. "We've got company." Aiden's heart skipped a beat as he turned sharply toward her. She was looking past him, her eyes narrowing as she focused on the dark passageway leading deeper into the facility. The faint echo of footsteps reached his ears. "They found us," Zara muttered, stepping forward to take cover behind a nearby console. "Get ready." Aiden's pulse quickened. He knew they couldn't afford to be caught off guard, not in a place like this. He drew his energy blade, its edge glowing faintly in the dark, and moved toward a nearby pillar to take cover. Zara followed suit, her blaster ready, her stance prepared for whatever was coming. The footsteps grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't just one or two people, there was a group of them. The Black Banner was closing in, and it was only a matter of time before they would be in direct conflict. Aiden's mind raced through tactical scenarios. The Black Banner had the element of surprise on their side, but they weren't invincible. The facility was vast, and there were plenty of places to hide and regroup. They could use the shadows to their advantage, if they acted fast. "Zara," Aiden whispered, his voice steady despite the tension in his chest. "I'm going after the device. You cover me. If I can figure out how to activate it, we can use it to our advantage." Zara shot him a look, her eyes betraying her concern, but she didn't argue. "Just don't do anything reckless," she replied, her voice firm. "I'll make sure they don't get close." Aiden gave her a brief nod before slipping away from cover and heading toward the spire. His footsteps were quiet, but the urgency of the moment made his movements feel louder than they really were. As he approached the device, he could feel a pull, something deep within the structure, almost like a magnetic field drawing him closer. His fingers brushed against the cool surface of the spire, and for a moment, the humming grew louder, more intense. Suddenly, the ground beneath him shook. Aiden staggered, his heart pounding in his chest as the entire facility seemed to come alive. The lights flickered erratically, and the walls rumbled as if something deep within the planet was shifting. "Aiden, get out of there!" Zora's voice screamed through his earpiece. Her panic was palpable. Something's happening. Aiden's pulse raced as he tried to steady himself. The device was awakening, but not in the way he had hoped. The energy readings spiked, far beyond anything he had ever seen, and the hum turned into a violent roar. He had to act fast. He reached toward the device, trying to decipher its controls. Symbols flashing across the surface, like a language that was ancient, yet somehow familiar. He had no time to study them. Instinct guided his hand. As he pressed a series of symbols, a surge of energy shot through the room, and for a split second, everything went still. Then, all hell broke loose. A blinding light erupted from the core of the device, sending a shockwave through the facility. The air crackled with energy, and Aiden was thrown back, crashing into the ground. He fought to regain his bearings, his vision blurred, but he could feel the power of the device coursing through the air like a living thing, vibrating with an unnatural force. Through the haze, he saw Zara, her silhouette moving in his direction, but the tremors of the facility were getting worse. "Aiden, we need to get out of here now," she shouted, her voice barely audible over the roar of the destabilizing machine. Aiden's mind raced. They had triggered something terrible. But they couldn't leave yet, not until they had answers, and the only way to get them was to survive the chaos they had unleashed. Not yet, Aiden growled, struggling to his feet. We need to know what this thing is. Before Zara could protest, a booming explosion echoed through the facility, shaking the very foundations of Vega Prime. It was time to move, time to get out before whatever was waking up inside the device finished what it had started. The explosion had thrown them off balance, but Aiden's mind snapped into overdrive. The air around him was charged with electricity, thick with the aftermath of the device's activation. The room shimmered, and the wall seemed to ripple as though reality itself were being distorted. Aiden! Zora's voice cut through the chaos, her figure emerging through the smoke and dust. She was close, but her eyes were wide with fear, her blaster still aimed toward the entrance, ready for any threat. We need to move now, she shouted, but Aiden's feet were glued to the ground. His heart pounded as he looked toward the device, its energy swirling around the room like a storm. It was no longer just a machine. It was something alive, something that could not be controlled. Whatever the Black Banner had been seeking here, it had unleashed something far more dangerous than anyone could have anticipated. I can't leave yet, Aiden muttered, his voice hoarse. His eyes were fixed on the device at the center of the room. The symbols on its surface were shifting now, swirling faster and faster, glowing with an intensity that hurt to look at. Zora grabbed his arm, pulling him away from the device. We have to get out of here, Aiden. Whatever you're thinking, this place is coming apart. We won't survive if we stay. For a moment, Aiden hesitated. The pull of the device was irresistible. He could feel its power thrumming beneath his skin, calling to him. There was something in those symbols, something he couldn't quite understand, but it was as if they were beckoning him to unlock their secrets. But Zara was right. This was no time for curiosity. The facility was on the brink of collapse, and they had no idea what kind of hell they had unleashed by activating the device. He had to focus on survival. Reluctantly, Aiden allowed himself to be dragged toward the door, but the facility was no longer offering them an easy escape. The ground trembled beneath their feet as the walls cracked open, revealing the inner workings of the facility's heart. Massive pipes and conduits, long dormant, now hissed with steam and vented energy like some kind of wild animal. The entire complex was coming alive, and it was clear that the device had been the catalyst. But the question remained, what had it been built for, and what would it do now that it was awake? We're not going to make it if we keep running through this maze, Zara said, her voice tight with urgency as they sprinted through the hallways. The ground beneath them was shifting, and the lights flickered erratically, casting unsettling shadows. We need to get to the ship, now. Aiden nodded, his pulse racing. The exit was still a good distance away, and the deeper they ventured into the facility, the more unstable it became. But there was no choice. They had to get to the ship. They had to get out of there before whatever was awakening inside Vega Prime consumed everything in its path. Suddenly, the walls on either side of them buckled, and a loud screeching sound filled the air. A massive blast of energy erupted from one of the chambers ahead, followed by a shockwave that knocked them both off their feet. Aiden's head hit the ground hard, and for a moment, the world spun around him. Zara was quick to recover, pulling him to his feet. Come on, we don't have much time. They sprinted through the crumbling corridors, their footsteps echoing in the now chaotic facility. As they neared the exit, the ship's landing bay came into view, but the moment they reached it, they froze. Standing between them and the exit was a group of Black Banner soldiers. They were well armed and well prepared, their weapons raised and aimed directly at Aiden and Zara. Their leader, a tall figure clad in dark armor, stepped forward, his eyes cold and calculating. You're not leaving, he said, his voice low and menacing. Aiden's mind raced. The soldiers had obviously been tracking them since they arrived, but now, with the chaos surrounding them, they had no choice but to make a stand. They were caught between the Black Banner and the collapsing facility. There was nowhere to run. Zara shifted her weight, her blaster aimed directly at the leader. I don't think you're in a position to stop us, she said, her voice defiant. The Black Banner leader smirked. You don't understand. This isn't about you. It's about the device. His eyes flicked toward the entrance to the facility, where the faint glow of the spire could still be seen, pulsing ominously. We were sent here to secure it. And now, thanks to your little activation, you've made it impossible for anyone to control. Do you have any idea what you've unleashed? Aiden's stomach sank. He had suspected the device was more than just a weapon, but hearing it from the enemy's mouth confirmed his worst fears. The device was not just an artifact, it was a key, and now it was unlocked. But to what? And why had the Black Banner been so desperate to control it? Get out of our way, Aiden growled, his grip tightening on his energy blade. But the leader's smirk didn't falter. I'm afraid you're already too late. The device will finish what it started. The galaxy's fragile peace was a lie, and now it will burn. Before Aiden could react, the facility rumbled again, and the ground beneath their feet shifted violently. A massive explosion rocked the chamber, sending debris flying in all directions. The Black Banner soldiers scattered, and Aiden and Zara were thrown back, their bodies slammed into the walls. The fight wasn't over, but Aiden realized with chilling clarity that their struggle was no longer just about survival. It was about preventing a cataclysm that could consume the galaxy itself. We need to stop it, Aiden shouted to Zara, his voice fierce and determined. We need to stop whatever's coming. Zara nodded, her expression resolute. Then let's finish this. They didn't hesitate. The time for escape had passed. Now they had one mission: to prevent the galaxy from descending into chaos. The facility was falling apart around them. The walls groaned under the pressure of the violent tremors, and sparks flew from broken conduits. The air was thick with smoke and the acrid stench of burning metal. Time was running out. Whatever Aiden had triggered with the device was now spiraling out of control, and the Black Banner soldiers weren't the only threat they had to contend with. Aiden's mind raced as he struggled to his feet, his body aching from the blast. Zara was already up, her weapon raised, scanning the debris for any signs of movement. They couldn't afford to be distracted. The device was still their main concern, but the soldiers were closing in again, taking advantage of the chaos to advance. Aiden! Zora's voice was sharp, pulling him from his thoughts. We need to deal with them before we can stop the device. I'll cover you, just get to the control room. He nodded, his chest tightening. He had no illusions about the danger they were facing. The Black Banner would stop at nothing to claim the device. But Zara was right. If they didn't shut it down, everything they had fought for would be lost. The control room was ahead, just a few corridors away, but getting there wouldn't be easy. The soldiers were spread out now, taking strategic positions, covering every exit and turning every hallway into a potential trap. Aiden's pulse quickened as he darted to the side, moving in and out of cover, his blade at the ready. Zora, always a step ahead, opened fire, forcing the Black Banner soldiers to retreat and take cover. Their shots were precise, cutting through the air with deadly accuracy. Aiden watched as she expertly handled her blaster, picking off one soldier after another. Keep moving, she called to him, her voice steady despite the chaos. I've got you covered. Aiden didn't need further encouragement. He sprinted forward, weaving between the pillars and walls of the decaying facility. His heart raced, the sound of his footsteps drowned out by the booming explosions around them. Each time the ground shook, he felt it reverberate through his bones, but he kept going. Every second was precious. When he reached the control room door, it was locked. A quick scan of the terminal revealed the security code. No surprise there. He had learned the Black Banner's patterns by now. With a few swift commands, the door slid open. Inside, the room was dimly lit, filled with the hum of ancient systems and the pulsating energy from the device. Aiden's breath caught as he saw it up close, its power now fully unleashed, the energy flowing like a torrent through the room, crackling in the air and distorting the reality around it. "This is it," he murmured to himself, stepping forward. The room felt like it was alive, a living organism feeding off the device's energy. If he didn't act fast, this could tear the entire facility apart and take them all with it. His hands flew over the control panels, desperately searching for any way to shut it down. Symbols flashed before his eyes, faster than he could comprehend. But amidst the chaos, one thing became clear. The only way to stop the device was to reverse the energy flow, but to do so meant sacrificing himself. "Aiden," Zora's voice crackled over the comms, her voice strained. "We've got a problem. The Black Banner's closing in, and they've got reinforcements. I can't hold them off much longer." His heart skipped a beat. He knew this was it, the moment of truth. There was no more time for second guesses, no more room for mistakes. "Aiden, don't do it," Zora's voice pleaded, but he didn't respond. He couldn't. The decision had already been made. He slapped a series of buttons, initiating the sequence. As the energy surged around him, the control room grew brighter, the air buzzing with intensity. He could feel the heat rising, the oppressive force of the device reaching its peak. If he didn't stop it now, there would be no way back. With one final motion, Aiden pressed the central control button, and the entire facility seemed to hold its breath. A deafening roar erupted, the energy in the room building to a catastrophic crescendo. Aiden felt himself being pulled toward the device, his body convulsing from the surge of power. The air thickened and his vision blurred as the power coursed through him, locking him in place. Suddenly, everything went still. The explosion that followed was immense. The walls of the facility collapsed inward, the structure folding upon itself in an uncontrollable cascade of metal and fire. The Black Banner soldiers screamed, but their voices were drowned out by the deafening roar of the collapse. Aiden's body was thrown across the room, the control panels short-circuiting as the device's energy dissipated. But just before everything went dark, a single thought echoed through his mind. He had done it. The device was shut down. The galaxy's fragile piece, it seemed, had been saved, at least for now. When Aiden awoke, he was lying on the cold, fractured floor of the control room, surrounded by debris and silence. His body ached, but he was alive. Barely. Zora was by his side in an instant, her face a mix of relief and worry. "You did it," she said softly, her voice a whisper. Aiden could only nod, his breath shallow. But the battle was far from over. The Black Banner would regroup. They would come again, and when they did, Aiden and Zora would be ready. The galaxy might have been saved for the moment, but it was far from secure. And Aiden's journey was far from over. But as he looked up at Zara, he realized one thing for certain: he would not face it alone.